Hello, everybody. This is Margareta Harris in the World Health Organization headquarters, welcoming you to this global press conference on July 7, 2023. This press conference is being held to update you on our work on prevention and response to sexual misconduct. We have two speakers in the room, Dr. Gaia Gamahawagi, our WHO Director of Prevention and Response to Sexual Misconduct, and a special guest, Mr. Hervé Gogo, who is an independent reviewer of the implementation of the Independent Commission's recommendations. Online, we also have two other experts in the field, Ms. Lisa McLennan, our Director of Internal Oversight Services, and Ms. Sigrid Kranaweta, our Principal Legal Officer. So without further ado, I will hand over to Dr. Gamawagi, who will speak first, followed by Mr. Gogo, and after that we'll open the floor for questions. Over to you, Gaia.
Thank you so much, Margaret, and thank you to all of you for taking time to attend this media briefing, focusing on the prevention of and response to sexual exploitation, abuse and harassment, or as we like to say in WHO, sexual misconduct. You may know that every quarter, WHO briefs all 194 member states on the progress that we make and the challenges we have in this area of work. And we had such a briefing this morning. So in today's briefing with you, we are trying to have more regular briefings for media, and this is part of that commitment. I wanted to share very briefly with you some highlights of the progress this year, and then introduce you and give space to Mr. Gogo, the independent expert from the Independent Commission, to share his preliminary findings of an external review he's conducting to determine how and to what extent WHO has implemented the recommendations of the Independent Commission, whose report was released in September 2021 and, as you know, catalyzed a large change across our organization. So for the progress, some highlights in the implementation of our 3-year strategy, and after that, more concretely, some accountability actions we have taken in the recent months. So first of all, I wanted to assure you that we have completed the first year of support to all 115 survivors of SEA in the Democratic Republic of Congo identified by the Independent Commission. We've talked about this at previous times. We've provided holistic support. And now we are reviewing together with UN and NGO partners how the next phase of more targeted support can be delivered to these survivors. Even in the next phase, WHO will continue to support any and all survivor who needs more support, even if they are affiliated to SEA allegations by personnel from other agencies. In the meantime, anyone who needs help is provided support through UN and NGO partners and the Field Victim Rights Advocate in DRC, and we're very grateful to them. We have now completed the development and update of a strong policy framework for preventing and responding to sexual misconduct. This was a commitment we made in the Management Response Plan. Earlier this March, we launched a new policy on preventing and addressing sexual misconduct, and now we are socializing it across WHO. Last week, I'm pleased to say, we launched a new policy on preventing and addressing retaliation and a revised code of ethics. These, together with our staff rules and our regulations, provide a modern, clear and strong foundation for PRS work. The policy related to retaliation is especially important as it strengthens a victim and survivor-centered approach through effective and timely retaliation investigations. The new, what we call the PAR policy, moves authority for retaliation investigation to the internal oversight services, so our investigation team. And now anyone with a contractual relationship with WHO enjoys such protection. Our internal oversight services will seek to complete the investigation on allegations of retaliation within 120 days. And our ethics office remains responsible for coordinating preventive and or protective measures. The second document we released, the new Code of Ethics, we call the Code, updates the 2017 version, which was called WHO Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. And it is situated in the context of the overall WHO internal framework's policy review on matters of conduct. This code is different from before in that it contains a first part, which serves as a general binding statement that we sign, all personnel, to the WHO. And it embodies ethical principles, core values, the oath of office and loyalty, WHO values charter, as well as WHO regulatory and policy frameworks. The second part of the code is a guiding framework, and it's revised extensively to include many issues, including the prevention and response to sexual misconduct. This morning, our Director General, when he addressed our member states, stated that policies need another level of clarification. And at the World Health Assembly in May, member states urged us to finalize the Prevention and Response to Sexual Misconduct Accountability Framework. This framework actually details individual accountabilities across 7 categories of staff, starting from all personnel to people like me in accountability functions, to country directors, and to the Director General himself. This is near finalization, and it will be the final piece we need to fully implement and enforce our strategy. We've also made some progress to address one of the biggest remaining risks in our operations, the risk of sexual misconduct by our implementing partners. And we're doing this together with UN agencies. All our country officers are required to complete an annual sexual misconduct risk assessment exercise and develop targeted risk mitigation plans. To safeguard our work in countries, we continue to expand our country PRS focal point network. We have about 400 now, but 1 in 3 of them, 1 in 3 of them, 1/3 of them, are in our priority countries. We also now have senior level prevention and response to sexual misconduct coordinators in 5 of our regional offices who can lead the work in countries. All in all, in this first year, we have made a solid start, but we have a long way to go. Today, at the half-year mark, about 10% of the 78 targets we set for this year are completed, 62% are in progress, and only 6% remain uninitiated. I'd also like to update you on actions that we are taking for personal accountability. In the first 6 months of this year, we received 48 allegations of sexual misconduct. 6 were substantiated and are being processed. Since the last quarter of 2022, WHO has fired 7 personnel, including at director level, for sexual misconduct, and blacklisted them from being hired in the UN system by entering their names in the UN ClearCheck database. A little bit of information also on the pending investigations that the UNIOS are conducting related to the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have received to date 3 full investigation reports, and these are being processed according to set procedure. And we are looking forward to receiving full reports for the rest of the investigations. WHO also provided information in respect of 16 alleged perpetrators linked to WHO at that time to DRC national authorities. And we're collaborating also with the local tribunal in Goma, which is overseeing the cases of 13 survivors who are proceeding with legal action and using legal aid support provided by WHO. Before I conclude my opening remarks, I'd like to give you a little background on the ongoing review mission by Mr. Avi Gogo. The mission was proposed by the 2 co-chairs of the Independent Commission, which our Director General accepted. It commenced in mid-April with the following objectives. Number 1, to conduct a review of WHO's actions based in the Independent Commission recommendations. Number 2, to assess the level to which WHO's actions address the recommendations. Number 3, where further follow-up might be required, to highlight the remaining challenges. And number 4, to brief WHO senior management and member states on the review findings. This morning, Mr. Gogo briefed member states on his preliminary findings. And with that, I hand over to Dr. Harris to continue the press conference. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gamawagi. As Dr. Gamawagi said, Mr. Gogo is eminently qualified for the work he is doing, and I'll give you a little bit more background. He's a former judge from the Côte d'Ivoire and has been senior judicial officer in the UN mission in DRC, known as MONUSCO. He's been a legal advisor in chambers for the International Tribunal for Rwanda, and is a former advisor to the Registrar of the International Criminal Court, and then was coordinator for the Independent Commissioner now, and now, as Dr. Gamawagi has outlined, is reviewing the implementation of those recommendations. And with that, I'll ask Mr. Gogo to make his remarks.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Harris. Thank you very much, Dr. Gaia. I'm very pleased to be here. And as Harris said this morning, Mrs. Harris just said, this morning I briefed the member states on my preliminary findings, and I want to share with you, a member of the press, exactly some of these findings. So, but before that, it's very important to clarify my mandate. Gaia gave you some indication of my mandates, about my mandates, which has been commissioned by the co-chairs of the Independent Commission and the Director General. So my mandate is to verify the implementation by WHO of the recommendation of the Independent Commission. And as you know, the Independent Commission released its reports in September 2021 and made several recommendations. I will not read through all these recommendations because they are long, but what I have done as a reviewer is to focus on the issue raised by the Independent Commission and then verify, review accordingly the action undertaken by WHO. So I've identified, in fact, four issues. The first one being the accountability question. The second one, the strengthening of the organization SCA approach. The third one being the assistance to victims, the question of the assistance to victims and survivors. And the last one, the cooperation with the national authorities. So my work will be done around these four thematics. So at each point, I always ask, the first question is, what did the Commission recommend, and what did WHO do regarding the implementation of that recommendation? So on the first issue of the accountability question, the Independent Commission asked the Director General, because he is the main recipient of the report, so the WHO DG, to first initiate an action to evaluate any managerial failure, because in the reports, the Commission raised the issue of a potential managerial failure. That's the first point. The second point, the Commission also realized that its work couldn't cover all the cases, the SCA cases, so the Commission requested WHO to further investigate the matter in order to possibly find new cases and address the issue. And the intention here is really to know a lot about, to have the maximum information about victims and survivors, and provide with them the appropriate help and assistance. So at the managerial level, the question I ask myself is, what did WHO do to investigate any managerial failure, which generally speaking is done through an internal process in any organization. But since in the case of WHO, the internal body, which was OIS, was tainted by the report of the independent commission as not having implemented duly the March 2017 policy, the WHO decided to avoid any conflict of interest to outsource the task to the UN OIS in New York. On a legal point of view, I think that was the best decision to take. Irrespective of the outcome of the decision of the OIS, the action undertaken here was the purpose of that action was really to assess any managerial failure. That's the first point I wanted to make with respect to that. The second point concerning the identification of SCA perpetrators and concurrently also of survivors and victims. Likewise, the WHO also initiated that action through a memorandum of understanding with United Nations or UN OIS in New York to undertake further investigations. And Gaia alluded to that. Dr. Gaia alluded to that WHO is receiving already some feedback with respect to that. Even though as a reviewer, and I've already talked about that with WHO leadership, that I consider that it took too much time, and that's something need to be done to streamline the process, because many things depends on the completion of that the further investigation, and particularly the question of assistance to provide to victims and survivors. So that's the first point. I'm doing that quickly because I'm much more interested in the QA session. So the second part of the recommendation of the independent commission, it was for WHO to strengthen its organizational approach to SCA in order to increase its level of preparedness and response in managing future incidents. So the question is, has WHO undertaken any action with this respect to strengthen its capacities to respond to SCA? My response would be that prima facie, and even more than prima facie, obviously WHO has undertaken some action with this regard. First of all, WHO adopted a new SCA policy and undertook several structural changes, starting with creating a standalone department in charge of coordinating the corporate response, the corporate policy of WHO, and which is managed by Dr. Gaia. WHO also restructured its own internal investigation body, which is OIS. And what is very interesting now is that as much as WHO was not in a position to investigate internally the further cases, further investigation, the fact that the OIS has been restructured and fully restructured, the recruitment of a new head of OIS, a new head of investigation, it means that my assessment is that WHO, in order to streamline the further investigation, could even recall some of the cases that has been handed over to UN OIS, just to expedite the process of completing the investigation. So In addition to those structural changes, WHO also provided a budgetary response. And all what I'm talking about, except for the policy, these are really new tools of dispensation in SEA matters by WHO, including the budgetary response with fund commitments of 50 million to support all SEA-related activities and specific victim support assistance fund also. So in addition to that, WHO also undertook some activities to reinforce, I would say, the capacity of the organization, be at trainings level. They also set up a working group on victim support and also initiated some victim support projects. That's something I will also develop quickly in the next issue I've identified concerning the recommendation, and which is the third group, the third category of recommendation, which are related to assistance to victims and survivors. I think even as coordinator of the Secretariat of the Independent Commission, that was the most difficult part when we were drafting the report. And if you pay attention to what the Commission said in the report, is really to put in place mechanism so that to provide assistance to the victim, including eventually the possibility of reparation. And you will understand why we use those wordings. So I would say that at this level, my first approach was to assess what kind of service that were provided to the victim at this stage. So I came to the conclusion that it is the usual UN standards that was followed: psychological support, money. How to say that, money-led or money support activities, or money earnings activities.
Income generating.
Yeah, income generating activities, sorry. And also, I say psychological support, income generating activities, and legal assistance. Yeah, legal assistance for those of the victim who wanted to file a lawsuit. So I would say that from the interaction I've had with many NGOs on the ground, and with the UN agencies operating on the ground in the framework of the ISC coordination, I came to the conclusion that this UN standard support were not sufficient, and that there is a need to make a progress and to evolve to a specific and targeted assistance to victims and survivors, because not all the victims want to be hairdressers or tailors. So I always used to give that example of a victim willing, for instance, to resume its studies, studies at university, and that's, for me, that's really something that should be done without any difficulty, and providing scholarship, for instance. So these are one of the possibility of helping expanding the level of assistance to victims. Then I come to the question that is, I would say, the most difficult. It's the question of reparation to victims. I think we all want really victims to get compensated, but the question is how we will reach that aim. As it stands currently in the UN system, there is no legal provision. I'm not saying that because I'm supporting that. I'm just, I'm a reviewer. I have to assess the situation and make some proposal. There is no legal provision that will enable any UN entity, it's not only WHO, to pay a direct reparation without a court decision that is assessing the liability of someone with respect to the liability of the organization. The organization is not only someone, the liability of the organization. You have to make the distinction. What does it mean? It means that even if a perpetrator is found responsible and liable to SCA, he is the one who will have to pay that. It's not the organization. But as I explained to the member state this morning, is it possible really to stick to that orthodoxy when you realize that victims are faced with almost an impossible task to prove to court that to make their case to court? Just to give you one example, all the victims from the file I've seen, the perpetrator, they don't even know the identity of the perpetrator because the perpetrator came to them with false identity while being staff, not only of WHO, because people tend to think that all the case that the IC handled were WTA related. No, there were more than that. So these are the kind of difficulty that victims are faced with them. How then do you make a lawsuit that will really acknowledge your right to reparation? So I think that there is a need to change the paradigms, not only in WHO, but broadly in the UN system. And it all depends really on member states. They need to make some provision to enable the UN Secretariat, the agency, WHO, to move a step forward and figure out how to create maybe a mechanism of compensation without waiting for the court process to end. But this is really not easy, and it doesn't depend on the organization as such, but it depends on the legal framework in which the organization is working. And currently, the legal framework in the broad UN does not allow for a direct reparation of this kind. So, but something must be done. I'm coming now to the last point, which is the cooperation with national authorities. I have had the opportunity to interact with the prosecutor, the Congolese prosecutor, who is in charge of handling the 13 cases Gaia related to. We have had an interesting interaction, and including with also the legal office of WHO. And I'm very happy that there are some action that are being undertaken there. We have to, it's very important to say that those 13 victims who decided to file a lawsuit, they did it in the framework of a project launched by WHO. As a former staff having worked in Congo, as the former UN staff having worked in Congo, that's the first time I see something like that. I was also involved in handling projects in northeastern Congo regarding fight against impunity, but I've never come across such an effort. So this has to be also noted that the 13 complaints were being made rendered possible within the framework of that the WHO project. And what is really interesting is that the NGOs working in this framework also supported the prosecutor in his handling of the case, the request for information. So WHO received also a request for information, and they responded to that. So the more, and that's the reason why I alluded to the possibility for WHO to recall some cases from UNOIS, because it's taking too long, because it will also increase the flow of information that are being shared with the national authorities. So to finish, is that on this point, there is also now some information that are coming back from UNOIS, even if it is not fully completed. Now, those information, once the investigation is completed, and on the assessment of WHO, that could also be give case for referrals to national authority. So overall, I will say that out of the 4 issues, first issue, accountability issue, I will say that it has been done the way the Independent Commission asked it. It's very important to note that the way the Independent Commission asks is to WHO, please undertake an action to assess any managerial failure. It has been done, and the rest. The second point concerning the strengthening of SCA approach, it is visible. There is something that has been done, a new architecture on SCA. Cooperation with the national authority is ongoing and is being very, very actively considered. The only point where I will say that there is really a need for an effort is to come to an arrangement where we can provide the best assistance possible to the victim and survivor, and I've explained why. So, all in all, this is what I have to say, and I'm very glad to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gogo, for that comprehensive outline of the work that you've undertaken. So now I'll open the floor for questions. Unusually, we've got quite a number of written questions, but I'll start with the first person with his hand up online. That is Donato Mancini from the Financial Times. Donato, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for taking the question. So, I understand what Mr. Gogo is saying on reparations and how they should be paid and how there's no legal framework for that to happen and that needs to change. But what is his overall assessment of WHO's response to the events in DRC? Could we get him on that? And then on managerial mismanagement, does he deem it appropriate that no senior manager has lost their job in relation to these events that happened years ago now at this point? And then very last one, will we see the report in full? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that goes over to you, Mr. Gogo, for that. We take questions one by one in this format, so over to you.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So the first question was general assessment?
Overall, sort of your headline, basically, on your assessment.
Okay. And the second was the managerial failure. The assessment. Okay. And whether, I think the easiest one? Sorry. I think the easiest one is that the report will be made available. I think the report, I think latest 21st of July, the reports will be given to DG and the co-chairs of the Independent Commission, and they will decide what to do with that. But the fact that I'm already sharing some findings with you, I think that WHO will be very open to share any more findings I'm doing. I will make on this regard. No, the overall assessment of WHO since the Congo crisis, but I will say that I've had the opportunity to work for the UN mainly in operations. I work in Haiti, and I also work in the Congo. In Haiti, I've also shared board of inquiry with respect to SCA. And I will say that the UN operation are, I would say, technically more equipped to handle all those kind of things. When I say technically more equipped, there is the possibility immediately to contact when for instance, the SCA is committed by a uniform personnel, it is handled very quickly. The national authority will be informed and it will be suspended, put in the airplane, and it will be sent back to his country. So they are more or less used to that. But it's normal that for WHO it was very difficult to handle that because they don't have many precedents of handling this matter. But I think that they have done a lot of effort to catch up with the rest of the organization. They are part of the ISC. I have myself also interacted with the ISC coordination in Congo. And I can tell you that they are doing all their best to reinforce their collective response. And I also think that WHO, because if you take the PSC coordination, for instance, the coordinators, you go from 0 to 30 to 40 PSC coordinators and focal point as well. So I think it's a good start and more than a good start. And the ultimate goal is really to ensure that to reinforce the work of the prevention work and also the response. What does it mean? Is that to put WHO in a position to better handle SCA incident, because SCA incident will always happen. Now, the managerial failure, if I consider the fact that whether it's normal, the fact that there is no manager who has been sanctioned. Is that the question? Sorry? Okay. Okay, I think that we have to be careful here when with respect to the assessment we make about the recommendation of the independent commission. The independent commission asks a specific action from WHO without giving any determination as to the outcome of this action. What does it mean? The independent commission say, please undertake an action to assess any managerial failure, without saying that you have to sentence or you have to punish X or Y, but initiate an investigation and please be guided by the outcome of this investigation implicitly. And see, this is what has happened. So me as a reviewer, I will say, and I said it, I think that WHO has fulfilled its mandate. Now, whether someone has not been sentenced, has not been punished or suspended or fired, that will be going beyond my mandate here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gogwe. Now, we have a problem with time. We're getting very close to 1600, and we have a number of written questions. So I'm going to go to the written question. And I think there's a very important one. How will WHO know if it is really changing its culture and how its employees behave? And I'll ask Dr. Gaia Gamawagi to answer that.
Thanks so much, Margaret. So this is a really important question, because beyond putting structures and policies and people, what we really want is behavior change, and behavior change is only facilitated by culture change. So I've been working very closely with the rest of the UN agencies as well, and everybody is struggling, not just to have culture change, but to measure what that change is. What I can tell you is some of the things we're doing and some of the, if you like, the indicators that culture is changing. So if you take from 2 years ago to today, sexual misconduct is something that is talked about in the organization. People are training on it. People are coming in thousands to webinars, and webinars are not information sharing, they're actually to discuss. I started recently monthly open door sessions, about 700 people come just for a half-an-hour session, and it allows people to actually talk about how not only what they know, but how they feel and what is happening differently. And we've initiated safe forums for people to come and talk about what they think are challenges to addressing sexual misconduct, what can be done, and where colleagues can, if you like, rate the ideas that others have. So it's really becoming more open. It's openly talked about. An indicator that we can use, and it's a proxy indicator, and I think others are alluding to it, is the increase in the number of allegations. We know when there was no allegations, it didn't mean that there were no cases. It just meant people did not have the confidence and the trust to come forward. So the fact that we have increased allegations is what we call a proxy indicator, something that we can associate with a change in culture and increase in trust. Also, I meet hundreds of people every week, and often colleagues, not just in headquarters, but in regions and country offices, often talk to us about how they feel the culture is changing, particularly since we are taking disciplinary action, not just investigating. So there is a combination of things that tell us culture is changing, but we have a long, long way to go. And I'll just finish off, Margaret, if I may, just to say I'm also working with other UN agencies to actually come out with measurements to see how our trainings, our campaigns, and our other work across the UN are leading to behavior change and culture change. So really lots of direct and indirect observations. We are also waiting for the finalization of an external culture review to give us more concrete recommendations as to how to facilitate culture change at WHO. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gamawagi. So we've got time for just one more question, and that goes to Carmen Pound of Politico. So Carmen, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Margaret. I just wanted to hone in just one more time on the accountability issue. I remember that in the, when the initial allegations about what happened in the DRC came out, there were allegations that, Dr. Tedros knew about it and other really top managers of the WHO. So what I wanted to understand is, has that been clarified? Has the investigation revealed whether they knew anything about it and just sort of like let it happen or, turn the other way or not? Because that's very important. And I think that's also what Donato was trying to get at. That's very important to know what the accountability at the highest level of WHO was for what was happening in the DRC. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Dr. Gamawagi to start, and maybe Lisa McLennan online. No, I think we'll start with Dr. Gamawagi on that.
So accountability, so as Mr. Gogo said, the Independent Commission review had its findings and it requested the organization to investigate into possible managerial misconduct. And that was done. And the UNOIOS did not find that managerial misconduct was substantiated against anybody. So that's really all I have to say on that. But what I can say is, since that, we've realized that we do have to be very clear about individual accountability, not just an organization's accountability. And that's why the accountability framework for prevention and response to sexual misconduct that I spoke of earlier is very important, because it now will clearly state, beyond our policies and our code of conduct, what are the accountabilities of a director general, of a regional director, of a head of country office, of a director such as myself, of a team leader, a coordinator, a staff member. So we've realized that it is very important to clarify that and communicate that. But related to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the two documents we have are the Independent Commission report and the findings of the UNOIOS investigation reports. Thanks.
Quickly, to add to what Gaia said, I think it's an interesting question. Accountability really matters. I just want to explain, because when you do an investigation, there are what is happening beyond the scene. you see the results, but it's very important also to explain to you quickly how the independent commissions came to this conclusion, the process. I can assure you that we had access to every single email that was exchanged through a very long period, from the day the revelations were made in the press to the day the independent commission was installed. So we have had all the information. And when I say every email, including the email of the DG. So, and including the email of a DG and all his collaborators, including the departing chief of staff. So, and I've been privy of the UNOIS report. There was not a single finding about any decision or any information that was shared with the DG. So it's not that we wanted to hide anything. There is nothing to hide. The DG was interviewed twice. Many of his collaborators 3 times. So the independent commission carefully assessed the responsibility and the managerial responsibility concerning it. And when we came to the conclusion that were made, we were really sure that we did the right job. So that's very important. And beyond that, my job, my background is to do investigation. So you can trust me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really strong and clear. And then at this point, we will have to close the press conference because of time, but I'll just ask Dr. Gamawagi for final remarks.
Thank you very much. I think I have to call you Dr. Harris because you keep calling me Dr. Gamawagi. Margaret. Great. So I want to say thank you. I mean, this was really an attempt to be more proactive with the news that we have. For example, we wanted to share with you, we were beginning to get reports from UNOIOS. We wanted to tell you some of the things that we're doing. And if this is useful to you, we're happy to do this more regularly. Please also, I would like to convey the regrets from the Director General, who couldn't be here today because he was at a meeting that he couldn't change. But you know that he's also available every week at the weekly presser, and I'm often there too as well. So please feel free to bring up any questions you have. I think for WHO, the review that Mr. Harvey is doing, the Independent Commission is doing, is very important because we do invite external scrutiny. At the same time, we are being evaluated by the MOPAN evaluation, which also includes a part on prevention and response to sexual misconduct. And we really believe we have a lot to learn, a long way to go, but external scrutiny is really how we believe we will grow. Happy to take your questions through the media colleagues at any time. Thank you so much for joining and for your time, especially on a Friday afternoon. I wish you all a great weekend, and I thank all the colleagues here, Dr. Harris and our experts online, and of course, Mr. Harvey. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you all. And as Gaia said, please send your questions to mediainquiries@who.int, and we will follow up with the materials from this press conference. And thank you for your attendance. And the press conference is now closed.